listening to another episode of Force Cult with your
Woohoo!
hosts,
Yay! Yay!
me and that guy. What's up, that guy?
Hey, just being that guy. Really
Oh,
nondescript over here right now.
yep. It's all vague. Well, the
Everything feels
world is
vague right now. Everything's
everything.
there's no such thing as time. Every day is kind of Saturday, kind of Friday. I don't know. I've been at home working from home now for like a week and a half, and I don't know my name anymore. I don't think. I just know my email address and my Zoom login.
Are we living in this like really bizarre, like Groundhog's Day or something? I don't know what's going on, but don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. One of the great things about this podcast is that it is recorded in individual places, always has been, and so you benefit from our social distancing and self quarantine. So here we are. It's Force Cult. That's right. Took us a minute, but we got to the name of the show.
That's how any good cult works. We slow
Well, yeah,
play it, and then once you've bought in, we've got you. Then we let you
yeah, you
know,
don't.
by the way, our cult is the Jonestown cult. You may have heard
It's a
some
cult.
bad stuff, but you're already in. So
You look parched. Would you
congratulations.
like a glass of Kool-Aid, perhaps?
Now we've got good news. The Bhagwan is here to see you. Come on down.
No, you think about it. We should treat our intros a lot like most television shows. That there's the cold open, that's like 2.5 minutes long, and then we get to the title or the theme song.
Yeah. Well,
Hmm,
it's
there you
like
go.
the Conan O'Brien pod. He ends up sometimes having like a 10-minute conversation with his assistant about absolutely nothing before you even know who the guest is that week. So I feel like we're on good pace.
We're doing all right. We're doing all right. Well, currently most places are going into what I totally just forgot the phrase.
Shelter
Just because it's so good.
in
Shelter
place.
Shelter in place, yes. Which was an episode of The Twilight Zone, if I remember correctly. I don't know. It sounds like it. Shelter in place, yes. And so, I'm sure a lot of people are like going Star Wars binging crazy. Um, and this is the time to do it because Rise of Skywalker just made it to digital. And shortly after this goes up, the Blu-ray, DVD, 4K, whatever hard copy you decide to get it in will be out. And Jip, how many times have you watched it, man?
Well, I've only gotten to watch the movie once since I bought it, and I did get it like the minute it came out. Basically, I follow a couple people on Twitter that pay attention to things, and I knew like
Yes.
immediately, and so like had it downloaded, and yeah, it was awesome to get to watch it that night, completely unexpectedly. But and I've also gotten to watch the all the extras as well, so that's been really cool to get to go through all those. But only once because my wife and I have been watching the TV show Endeavor. It's a BBC show
Okay.
about a detective in England, and each episode is like an hour and a half long. And so after we put
Good quality BBC programming of
exactly, yeah.
give
So
you
it's
six
like
episodes of 90 minutes.
that you're exactly correct. And so we're like, I'm trying to get through it as quickly as I can so I can just like continue devouring all this Star Wars stuff. But I will say, I watched like 30 minutes of the making of documentary with my 2-year-old son.
Hmm.
And he and I have been reading the Little Golden Book Star Wars
Oh,
books.
nice.
It's
Yeah, I've got a
episodes
few of them.
1 through 6. Um, and it's just really cool to get to read those with him. He loves them. He's got like a kid's version of a visual dictionary that goes through episode 7, and so he's
Awesome.
like getting to know the character names and like you know is aware kind of what's going on. You know, he's only 2, so I don't really know exactly how much he's
What
picking up on. But
what is his most confused but endearing name that he has for a character?
um, I think that he probably the cutest is that in the visual dictionary he always wants to go to the Wampa page, um, and it sounds like wah 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 wah, and it's just really cute in his little baby voice. It is not cute coming from me whatsoever, and it's probably a very poor imitation. But he just gets like so excited about the Wampa, and he wants me to explain what's going on to Luke and why he is upside down, and so we'll be like reading through it, and then all of a sudden he'll just start yelling out that he wants to go to the Wampa page again. So that's pretty fun. But when we were watching, so he's like been exposed somewhat, but he doesn't know that they're movies. Like he has no idea that there's actually like something outside of these little short books, and so we've been watching the documentary together, and he got like so excited to see this. It was incredible to get to
Oh,
do
cool.
that with him. Yeah, so Henry's just like been so excited about these books, and then all of a sudden seeing them, on screen, it was like the cutest thing in the entire world, getting to see his just like disbelief and joy. And so every single time a character was on screen that he recognized, he would start like chanting their name. And then as soon as they were no longer on the screen and it would be like J.J. Abrams talking about something, he would be doing the sign language sign for more and just yelling out, more, more, more.
Oh,
And so, it's like Baka and D2 and 3P. And it's just the best thing in the world to get to
how
experience
cute.
that through the eyes of my son. And, as much as I absolutely adore Star Wars, the ability to get to share that with, my son and get to go through the process again from stage one, um, is pretty incredible, and it makes me love it even more. It's been a really great uh, period of time having this documentary in particular available to me because it's something that I can share with them that's more age appropriate than the actual films so far, and so I have showed them like now just like one episode of the Forces of Destiny with Chewbacca, and he was just like blown away by that as well. So
Awesome.
I think there might be
Nice.
some more Forces of Destiny in his future. I might have to screen some of them beforehand to make sure that they are age appropriate and don't send him into like a lightsaber sword phase at daycare or something like that. I don't need that right now. So, but
That's why
yeah,
I
it's
got
been pretty
Power
cool.
Rangers pulled from my viewing
Yeah.
because I was told I didn't want to be made too violent, but whatever.
Sorry, mom. I'm going to be violent anyway.
But Star Wars was
So,
okay, and Ren and
so let me
Stimpy
watch
was
his
just
Power Rangers.
fine.
Yeah. My mom would not let me watch Power Rangers either, but I was definitely watching Star Wars at least once a week. So you
Yeah,
explain that
yeah.
to me.
Yeah, I hadn't watched. I'd watched most of the little featurettes, and then I hadn't watched the documentary. And you had mentioned having started it, and so I jumped on it because my wife got the new Animal Crossing game, and now she is a hermit that lives inside of the shell of a Nintendo Switch.
That's great. That's great. Now you just have more
So,
time to do your selfish things. Perfect.
yeah, yeah. So, um, so yeah, I was like, well, I guess I can spend the 2 hours at home now watching this documentary, and sure enough, I did. Um, I actually I thought what was really interesting about this one compared to some of the previous like Star Wars, because for a fair amount of the films they usually do, um, at least an hour to an hour and a half, and this one's pretty good feature length. I think the last one from Last Jedi was a pretty good length too. A lot of times they sort of follow the making from like pre production through the end of post and kind of follow it
Yeah.
more, follow the making of it in a more chronological way. Whereas I actually really enjoyed that this one is presented to you in the chronology of the film itself.
Hmm.
So, kind of taking steps, looking at that, and then within those scenes, kind of addressing, well, this scene taps into this iconic moment, or as a callback to this from one of the other films and stuff. And so, kind of getting to go through the story and get that conversation with like J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio of kind of the process of why these things, play out the way they do in the story, which
Yeah.
I thought was a pretty cool way to approach it.
Yeah. And that way, it, I think that's partly what like made it hit me as much as it did. Like I think I
Mm-hmm.
texted you and I was just like, this is making me very emotional was the long and short of it. And, largely it's because of the fact that, they're hearkening back to, um, what we've seen before, whether in old documentaries or they're showing us footage from the original trilogy. It's, taking us on this kind of, production journey and you know, the real life side of this. And, when I think back to, growing up with these movies, I had the VHS trilogy that had uh, the Lucas documentaries on the front end of them.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and I had to, if I just wanted to watch the movie, I would fast forward through it. But frequently I would watch that and I like fell in love with what was going on behind the camera during that time. Like that's what made
Yeah.
me love the idea of filmmaking. And for a time in my life, I like wanted to, go to USC and follow in Lucas's footsteps, like, 100 million other people probably who saw those as well. And, getting to see, some of the same footage or interviews and, that really, tugged at my heart. And there, I think all of us probably had that dream growing up. It was like, man, like maybe one day I can be in a Star Wars movie. And, in a way, like it's, you're seeing um, like a dream, like a childhood, like hope and dream and aspiration
Yeah.
um, kind of like fade out because the dream ultimately has always kind of been the Skywalker trilogy, right? Like you want to be a part of that, and for the foreseeable future, that's something that is no longer possible um, unless you've already done it, unless you're John Boyega or whomever, and so I think that there's like this bittersweet kind of thing about it where you're watching it in one way, loving to get to see the process, see something that you experienced when you were young, um, but then like also having to acknowledge like, okay, like I have to let that go. And I didn't even necessarily
Yeah.
realize that I still
Yeah.
had that as like part of me and part of like who I am and what my hopes and desires are. Like I've always got this thought or dream out there that like one day I will work for Lucasfilms in some capacity. Obviously I'm an attorney now working in house for a company. I'm like, man, maybe I could do that for Lucasfilms one day. And that's something that's out there, but I mean, that's just a dream in the same way that, I was dreaming about being Luke Skywalker and, getting to effectively be, Mark Hamill or, you know, I don't know. It's just, it was weird to like
No,
realize that about myself, like as it was dying. And so like that made me very emotional and like sad, but also I thought that, it was something that was brought up um, specifically, um, by a couple people, Anthony Daniels in particular was talking about it as like, it's not sad. Um, I forget the word he used. He might have said melancholy or something like that. Um, but it's like we're getting to see Owen and Beru's house where Luke grew up where, Anakin, met his step sibling and, saw his mom out of slavery, and, all of this history that's gone on in this little house. And,
Yeah.
just it really made me tear up. I'm like getting to share this with my son during this time. And then, I'm realizing part of me that I had hoped would exist was not going to exist. And I didn't even realize I still wanted that. It was a lot going on all at one time. And, especially because, I've lived with it so long, but then also like I'm thankful that I really enjoyed the Rise of Skywalker, and I'm not somebody who is dissatisfied with the movie. And so, I was like getting to watch, the making of a movie I loved all at the same time. And so, I still get excited about that. So I don't know, there was a lot going on for me while I was watching that. And, yeah, it was a lot of processing.
I think I kind of sit in the same place with you because, um, for those of you listening who don't know, I'm sure I've talked about it a lot. I went to film school. I've worked on a fair amount of film productions in the short and feature length format. Less so in recent years, but um, after I the let's see, so the Disney acquisition happened um, the my last year of film school, and which was kind of when they first announced um, the sequel trilogy. And coming out of film school, I was like, "This is awesome. This is perfect." Like that dream of getting to work on a Star Wars sort of
Yeah.
died before
Yeah.
before I even got into filmmaking. Because by the time I was even working on I worked on my first feature was the same year that Revenge of the Sith came out. And which it just is weird. um,
Yeah. That's crazy.
and so like that kind of brought to me like, oh, this may be that chance that I get. And then um, I remember the first there was some I think it was a casting call for a Force Awakens that went out. That they kind of, they wanted to find some nobodies, Daisy Ridley kind of being one of those. So they put the casting call pretty widespread, not just sending it to, talent agencies and stuff like that, and allowing individuals to submit. And I remember seeing that and kind of being like, oh, they want the any person to be, working on this. And I think by the time I found out, like they had already closed out the casting call or whatever. And um, and as kind of the years went on, um, more and more of the films were coming out. And kind of my hope when Force Awakens came out and them announcing like the spin-off movies was, I'm like, I'll make it there. I'll somehow be involved by episode 9. Was like kind of what I kept telling myself. And I mean, admittedly, I pursued that in some aspects and not wholeheartedly in others. Part of that was also that I was in a new relationship. I got married, and a lot of other things were changing in my life. So I was kind of more focused on those. But I kind of look at it now, and I'm almost glad that I didn't, because now that the sort of Skywalker saga is wrapped up, like I still want to pursue the possibility of being at Lucasfilm someday, but I think I might enjoy that in a capacity where that is like more original content, I guess. That's not like not writing into the story that we all came to know. You know what I mean? And because we've sat by the last 5 years and watched the people who have been involved with this, reemergence just get torn to pieces
Oh, just
in
destroyed. Absolutely destroyed.
social media and stuff. And like before the Rise of Skywalker novelization came out, there was a lot of push of people who, yeah, you know, some people who got early releases of the book and stuff, but just kind of went up to bat for Ray Carson, saying like, I don't care what you think of the Rise of Skywalker. Don't attack this author because they are, you know, adapting something. Like, you know, you don't need to go after this person because they had, they didn't, you know, if you didn't like that story, that's not their fault.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you know, it's even down to that, that, you know, people feel like they need to protect those involved. And so in some ways I look forward to the possible future of being involved, but to get to create things that maybe start from scratch rather than build on a direct, you know, cornerstone of the franchise.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that makes sense.
So
Yeah.
you said you haven't finished, you did or you didn't finish the documentary?
Oh, I did. Yeah, I got to
You
finish
did.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So,
I was gonna
and
say, I
you
was
know,
like,
when
if you
it's
were
when
crying
it
in the first 30 minutes, I was like, man,
no, yeah,
you're gonna, it's gonna
the
get you by the
the last 15 or 20 minutes, you know, when you kind of like know it's like, okay, this is kind of like coming to a close. It really felt like, you know, the book was closing, so to speak.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, you know, it's in a way, um, that happened after, um, Revenge of the Sith, right? Because we kind of thought it was over then.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but then, you know, we were given new hope when we were older, and like we did have careers and skills, and it's like, you know, this like little spark that's kind of been, you know, in the back of your mind kind of grows a little bit again, whether or not I think I realized it ever. Um, yeah, and in particular, knowing, um, you know, somebody, you know, personally who is a part of the Films family, it makes it feel even more realistic. And you know,
Hmm.
like you could reach out and touch it if things broke right and you
Yeah.
worked hard and you know you sacrificed, and so you do kind of like have this sense that like, okay, maybe it could happen. Um, and you know, obviously, you know, like you said, like choices were made. You know, I made decisions that, you know, precluded something like that from occurring. I did not pursue internships there when I was in law school, things like that. um, but yeah, you know, it's one of those things that, um, you know, I think impacts us in like a very real way, and in,
Yeah.
you know, a I think like a generous way. I can, like have more grace with people who I think are volatile fans in the Star Wars fandom. Um, you know, acknowledging the fact that this is something that's highly emotional for a lot of us, and a lot of people did work their butts off to try to get to that place and were either shut down or failed. Um, and you know, so they have, you know, that kind of, you know, hurt or angst, um, and you know, like that kind of like wound that they're carrying now, and so it's like, okay, it's closing out, I didn't get to be a part of it, so you're kind of like starting off um, on a bad foot, so to speak. So
Hmm.
you know, maybe it'll help me to have more grace with people who are, people that I wouldn't necessarily want to meet in real life now. So
Yeah. Well, speaking of Rise of Skywalker, I have finished the novelization. You said you've started it, so we won't
yeah,
go
I'm maybe a
too
quarter of the way into it now. Yeah.
go too much into it. But yeah, I actually finished it today, and um, I to answer my own question from earlier, I think I've watched the film only once in full sitting, but probably eight other times. like like I have a tendency to like go to bed, fall asleep for about 20 minutes, and then wake up and be awake for about half an hour. And my wife is pretty quick to fall asleep, and so she'll want to go to fall asleep like putting something on, and so once she's out, then I'm like, all right, Rise of Skywalker. I'll put it on.
Yep.
And what I love doing too with like when I get one of those films for the first time is watching it with the subtitles to, kind of like commits it to memory, but also like if there's something maybe I misheard or something, um, didn't quite understand um, the way a person said a line or something like that. Um, so I can watch it silently and read the movie too that
Yeah.
way. And so yeah, I've a handful of other bits like partial viewings that I've had going on for the last week or so. Um, and then listen to the audiobook while I've been traveling. And it it certainly touches on some moments um, that I hoped they would, and some of them not in an extensive amount of detail, but just enough to kind of answer a little bit of like a not like a plot hole query necessarily, but like just wanting a little just to fill in a gap just a little bit for myself.
Yeah.
um, that the book's kind of doing for me so far.
Yeah.
And then other parts I actually feel um, get glossed over, like like a beat that I don't have a specific example, but sometimes it's like, most novelizations even, get a little more description in something, where it's like sometimes in this, like a 5 seconds of the book that you're like, oh, maybe we'll get a little more detail on. No, it's addressed in one sentence kind of thing. And you're kind of like, oh, well, okay, well. And there's some additional dialogue and stuff like that in there that we get a little more of. Um, I, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily consider it a spoiler, but a topic of discussion. That do you mind me talking about some of the stuff that's brought up later?
Go for it.
Okay. Well, key thing being that we get a little more information on Rey's parents. Um, Not a ton of detail, but something that we kind of talked about when the movie first came out, and that is her father. Um, where this is more of a Boba Jango situation in Palpatine's quest pre Return of the Jedi, knowing, you know, in pursuit of eternal life with Plagueis, since then he's been trying to find ways to um, basically stay alive and, preserve his power, knowing that, like, basically he sees himself as this ultimate Sith Lord, and, that the rule of two should basically always include him, that he should be one of those two. And so in his quest for doing that, we actually get some teases of this in like the Vader comic, of how he's constantly like genetically splicing things, and like there's a lot of like Sith alchemy and science and stuff going on there. But his son is actually his clone,
Uh-huh.
is something that's addressed in the book. So yeah, that was kind of a wonder of mine. I'm like, okay, did some weird Sith fanatic chick like sleep with Palpatine and they had a kid? Like, what's going on there? But no, in his quest to basically create a form that he could transition into, um, they got a physically okay one, but the like basically on the Force level wouldn't absorb him, so he became his own thing, and he's his son. And basically denied his father and lived his life, and that's where we get Rey's parents, or at least Rey's dad. Her mother is not addressed.
Deny
um
my father and refuse thy name.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So that was a question I kind of wanted to know, um which also got me to thinking that this isn't necessarily told, but my guess is that Snoke is maybe a byproduct of that too, in trying to find a new vessel that Snoke was
Yeah.
kind of created throughout that.
See,
Um,
I think that Snoke was not a clone. I think Snoke was
yeah,
its
not
own
necessarily a clone,
thing.
but
But yeah, I mean, definitely
yeah,
in the
he was.
novelization, it's apparent that Palpatine grew him on purpose
Mhm, yeah,
to fulfill a need that he had.
yeah, yeah, and that need became a puppet. But yeah, I felt like it was somewhere
Yeah,
along those
which
lines.
also tells us that Palpatine was a terrible artist because that dude was so ugly.
Right? Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So they did.
Now you're
what a
imagining
what a
Palpatine
weird
creating
guy.
a clay version of
Yeah.
Snoke beforehand. He's like, man, this'll do. Guys, make this one. Can you make
Yeah,
this?
that's a little tall, sir. Doesn't matter. Just go for it. Just do it.
So you want this divot in his head on purpose, huh?
Yeah.
Yes.
They
Do it.
we get addressed the survival of Zori and Babu, which was something that was kind of like it's a small window of time, but we address how they managed to survive. Um, and God, there was another thing I was trying to remember to bring up that I just can't think of right now. But um, no, I think overall it kind of gave a little information more into where I feel like I needed it into the story,
Yeah.
and embellished some of the train of thoughts for some of the characters for moments that like kind of conferred the way I felt about some of these scenes, like what I felt like this character was mentally going through and stuff, which I thought was really cool. The end sequence with like Ben and Ray on Exegol is really neat. A lot of the kind of emotions surrounding the stuff on Kef Beer with um, Ray, and then Kylo and his or Ben and his parents is tastefully handled. It's very nice. So you can look forward to enjoying more exposition on that. So give it a listen, those of you listeners, or a
Listen,
read,
listens. Yeah,
however you do your books these days.
I did take the COVID quarantine as a good excuse to re up on Audible, and
Yeah,
and so I actually got um, for the first time in a while an audiobook. I've only done actual like paper novels for a while, and since I'm no longer a student and don't have a free Audible account or anything like that anymore, free Amazon Prime or anything, where I get like a book a month, and
yeah,
so I decided to do that again, and I actually got it for free, and so I was very excited, and so I've
nice.
been listening while I go for my runs and stuff like that. So so it's been good. Yeah, I've enjoyed the voice acting on it, and I think they've
The voice
put some good production
does an
behind it. So
incredible job. Like, not all of his voices are like dead on, but he
the
when
tone,
he's
the
the
tone is what he
tone,
does really well.
with before he gets to the end of a sentence, like of course you've seen the movie, so a lot of the dialogue who's talking, but sometimes when it's like a new bit of dialogue before they say like Poe said or whatever, like he captures the essence of the character enough that like exactly who's talking. He does a phenomenal job. Um, the I think Dio, they actually used like sound bites of Dio from the movie, so he's
Uh
like
huh. Yeah.
directly put in there. But yeah, like down to Palpatine, Snoke, Han, he does incredibly well. Really, all the characters he nails. Maybe the only one that he goes a little overboard on is Beaumont. Is Dominic Monaghan's character?
Uh
He
huh.
overdoes
Yeah.
his accent just a smidge, But no, it's yeah, it's a good listen. So go listen again, as I have said before previously, once upon a time. Jip, I gotta admit something.
What are you going to admit to me?
I was fairly disappointed in the most
I
recent
knew
episode
it.
of Clone Wars.
I don't think you're the only one. I've seen a few people say that. So, yeah.
it and and I know why I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I can identify exactly why I did not enjoy the episode. And it's not that I didn't enjoy it. It just didn't carry with it the what you expect out of Clone Wars, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and that had to do with the territory of the episode. The episode in question that we're speaking about. Um, I don't feel like we need to spend too much time talking about the final bit of the Bad Batch arc. Um, Mostly because it just kind of like, hey, they did it, and way to go, Echo. You know, like that's kind of a self-explanatory arc. I feel like the one
Yeah.
thing I
It
wanted to
resolves itself. Yeah.
address with that is I forgot, like, in the crude animatic that they released years ago, doesn't come across in this version how like still pretty like dark it is when Anakin kills Admiral Trench. Like you're like,
Oh,
dude
yeah.
just like cold-blooded murders him. But returning the latest episode, Gone with a Trace, which I believe there will be a second part to this episode. Basically, today is probably when that came out. Um, is our first episode with Ahsoka in technically 7 years, which is wild. Because she left at the end of season 5. They went on for another season, but you know, we didn't get her back until Rebels, and by that it was, you know, it's different. We kind of had a different character on our hands by that point.
Yeah, we did.
Um, and so this is us having Ahsoka interact with the galaxy, still just Coruscant, but apart from the Jedi Order, and it is it's just kind of rocky to me. Um, I know initially this episode when they released, um, like some of the scenes with the animatics, Trace's character had a different name and was a male character, and I think I'm wondering why they changed that. Because my initial thought was like, well, maybe they changed it because, you know, she already had a little bit of a romantic fling with Lux. You know, maybe they were like, oh, we don't want to, you know, touch on that again. But at the same time, I was like, I kind of wanted to know, and who knows, maybe Ahsoka has interest in a girl. That it doesn't really matter. But there was just the pacing of this episode and the interactions were just like super uncomfortable for me. It was like being being at a party where you know the host and nobody else kind of situation. And that's how I felt about this episode. It was just
I get
like,
that. Yeah.
I was like, okay, when are your conversations going to be over?
Yep.
And I, you know, I think there's something to be said for Trace's character. I think her sister is a little over the top for me. Rafa, yeah, just kind of, I don't know, rubs me the wrong way. And so that's my spiel. Tell me what you thought.
You know, um, I think that, you know, each season of Clone Wars, if we go through it episode by episode, we'll point out, you know, somewhere between like 1 to maybe 4 episodes that were just like, okay, like I don't go back and watch that anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that you know, Gone with the Trace is the episode that will say that about season
in
7.
season 7. Yeah.
And hopefully there aren't any more. And I think that there's a sense that it's kind of probably, I'm like going off half cocked in a way here, um, because we don't really know exactly how we're going to feel yet at the end of it all. But I mean, we don't have a lot of time with season 7. We've got
Yeah,
what,
there's
10
12
episodes?
episodes, and this is the fifth one.
Yeah. And so
And
to have a throwaway,
there's at least one more episode in this. We know next week's episode is connected to this one.
yeah. And so I'm like, okay, to have like a throwaway, even single episode, much less possibly a throwaway arc, is kind of like, okay, guys, like we
Yeah.
waited how long so that you could give us, a very like laying the groundwork for something to come later type of episode. And because we're so close to the end of, the entire series now, it feels like it's more of a big deal that we're getting something that's just like, okay, all right, we're having to introduce new characters. Like, yes, we know that's the case because Ahsoka is no longer part of the social circle and work circle ultimately that
Yeah.
we've known her within, other than in Rebels. And it's like, so she's hanging out with like bums in the lower level of Coruscant who have like debt. It's like, cool. And there are
Yeah.
these droids. Like, I mean, like, okay, like season 3, that's one thing, but season 7 here at the end, it feels like there's more urgency in the timeline. And this
Yeah.
was kind of like you know, we needed a home run and we bunted. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it wasn't an out. Like we still got on base, but we freaking needed a home run.
Yeah.
So it feels like a bigger deal than I think it ultimately probably is in the context of
Yeah,
the entire series. But
for
because
sure.
it's been so long since we've had Clone Wars, and because we're so close to the end, I think it hit harder that it was a, quote unquote, filler episode. And I know
Yeah.
that there are a lot of writers out there who will say there's no such thing as a filler episode. It's laying foundation. I think we understand that. Um,
I'm
but
looking at you,
maybe,
season 3 of Lost.
yeah.
You know which episode you
what?
are.
What? No, every episode was beautiful. Not a bad one in the batch. Um, and yeah, so I don't know. Maybe we won't give it such a hard time in the future, but it definitely felt like one where I was like, okay, I just spent half the time on Reddit or something like that while I was watching it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe these characters that we were introduced to will have a greater, significance. Um, I assume they do, but it really did not feel like there was a lot going on there that I
Yeah.
am going to care about come, Friday afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the time this comes out, the second episode will be up, so that will we'll see how that goes. The clip they released today of the next episode, I still wasn't terribly keen on because it's like sort of confrontation between Rafa and Ahsoka, and because Rafa's like, "What's your angle?" And Ahsoka's like, "I don't have an angle. If anything, I'm trying to keep you out of trouble." And Rafa's like, "Well, you ever thought maybe you're the trouble that Trace needs to be kept out of?" I'm like,
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
all right. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's like I love having Ahsoka, and I think um, Jen Marie mentioned this on Twitter of saying like she wasn't a huge fan of the episode either, and one I commented saying like I think the episode is meant to serve as um the way that Ahsoka is feeling uncomfortable and vulnerable, and weird in this thing that she's been. It's like Coruscant's been her life, but when you pull one thing away from it, it's totally different. And for us as viewers, that's what this episode felt like. It's like you pull the entire supporting cast out of this thing that we know and love, and we feel a little uncomfortable and vulnerable now. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah,
And I mean, within the context of her arc and stepping away from the Jedi Order, in the high places in the sun, um, she's down in with the dregs now, right? And so
yeah,
this, shows her maybe doing what the Jedi ought to be doing, spending time dealing with, regular everyday human
being
problems
more kind of
rather than,
the Jesus route of being
yeah,
with the beggars and the yeah.
exactly. And so it's like, well, maybe that's what they're trying to exemplify. Um, but this is I think it was a poor way to do that compared to some of the
Hmm.
things that I think that they could have done, because I don't want it to be ham-fisted and clunky if you're doing that. I don't want it to be like, her, saving,
Like that
orphaned.
robot that she fought.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want it to be, like orphaned baby, cute animals that she's having to like rescue from the dog catcher or something like that, where it's like, okay,
Yeah,
guys, like this is, low hanging fruit, and yeah, we get it. But also when you're dealing with, ethically ambiguous, you know, kind of like gutter people who, aren't necessarily the kind of people who like really need help, and it felt muddy, and it felt like it didn't have a clear message. Maybe in the context of the next episode it will. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's just there.
yeah. it's it is. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
If we want to
You
start
know,
naming episodes of Clone Wars that are worse, we could go on for a little while. I don't
we
think
could,
at
we
all
could.
that this is the worst
You know,
episode that we've
and yeah,
gotten,
and
but it's definitely not
I
what
think
I was hoping for.
I think that's okay, but I agree with you on the point of season 3 might be more acceptable, but we're in the final season and that seems a little um careless to, you know, put in an episode like that. It's like, you know, I'm it would have been cool to get like the Dark Disciple arc on screen, because that's what it was originally intended to be, you know, was a series of episodes. But I'm also really glad that we got it as a book, because
Yeah.
that would have been at least 6 episodes to like really effectively get um, that arc across. Um, so yeah, I feel like they need to be a little bit more choosy, and I think part of this is too is like we know what's kind of coming in some of the final episodes too, like the Battle of Mandalore is one of those things that like we're all really excited to get to. And so having something like this sort of as a lead up is like uh, so enough to be spoke about that one. Um More importantly, and this is not confirmed, but on the topic of Ahsoka Tano, Slash Film this week put out an article saying that they have, through at least 2 sources, confirmed that Rosario Dawson will be portraying Ahsoka in The Mandalorian season 2,
Which has
which
me
is
excited.
which has me very excited. It's also very curious considering they just wrapped on season 2. So, um, so 2 questions, Jip. I guess you kind of already answered the one. Um, do you think Rosario is a good casting? Second question: how do you speculate that Ahsoka will be involved in the second season if she is a character to be seen, and
Yeah.
how much involvement?
I think that she's a good pick for the part because um, I think she's displayed like a physicality in previous roles that
Mm-hmm.
would mirror what we would see from an older Ahsoka. Not a teenager, but somebody who's filled out a little bit more, is more like physically obviously capable than Snip when she's young. Um, So I think that's one thing, that she can fill out well. And then also she's just like a really good actress, and she's got a really
Yeah.
wide range. She's done a lot of different kinds of roles, everything from, comedic stuff to, serious drama. And, I think that she possesses the ability to, bring the Ahsoka we've seen in Clone Wars and Rebels onto, the live action screen. And so I think that, she's capable physically. And then I think she's got the chops to handle a character that has so much already in existence in a medium that isn't always the easiest to translate, from, animation to, the real physical world. And so I think that she
Yeah.
has that capability. And then also, um, I think that, she's got, enough of a, like a face, that you could see being an Ahsoka face, which does matter,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I don't want somebody that's like, covered in prosthetics and as like a mask that has to be CGI'd and
Yeah.
stuff for it to have to be Ahsoka. And I think that she has a physical resemblance that's close enough to where, you put orange on
You
her
buy it
and maybe
as
use a
a
little bit of
yeah.
CGI. Um, that I think that I would buy it without being like, well, that's, you know, not Ahsoka. That's just somebody who looks kind of like her with
Hmm.
similar features, but that's not her. And so I think
Yeah.
that that would be a good casting if it happened for those reasons. And I would expect it would be a single episode, maybe two, um, if we actually
Yeah.
do get her. And I think that it would probably be something where um, we are looking for Jedi to help with the child.
Finding the child's family.
Yeah,
Yeah.
finding the family, finding
Where
the species, finding somebody that's force sensitive to, assist with, you know, rearing the child. I think that, she might be a source for the Mandalorian moving forward.
hmm
That's, very temporary and is not going to be somebody that's relied on for very long, but
Yeah.
somebody who can kind of be like a way station, um, providing a little bit of context and guidance and how to assist the child in growing up, how, to, nurture that force sensitive side
Handle
of
a
the
force.
child.
Yeah.
And then maybe helping point in the direction of, well, here's where you need to look. I've heard tell of Yoda's and Yaddle's species being from, X sector. And, I don't,
Yeah.
it's not been confirmed, but, I've heard that Yoda grew up here or something like that. And, maybe they'll know something there and that, kind of sends them off on another journey. So that's kind of what I expect. I think that's what, makes sense in context. But I don't think it has to be that way by any means.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ahsoka would be in her early 40s, I think, timeline wise, at this point. Makes
I think that's about right. Yeah.
because she's like 17 um around Revenge of the Sith. So tack on about 23 years for the prequel for the original trilogy, and then it's supposed to be 5 years after Jedi. So yeah, around early to mid 40s. I think is that where that puts her.
That makes sense to me. Yeah, I think
Um,
that's right.
so yeah, Dawson's a good. She's at a good age for that too to kind of, you know, embody that role. And I think she definitely. I know she has the physicality capabilities for a role like this. Um, Granted, I don't think we'll see too much out of her, since even by the end of Rebels, she had already seemed to take on this, more. Um, I don't want to say pacifist kind of approach to who she was, but a little more of like a
She's
Gandalfy,
seeking
the white,
alternatives to, yeah.
yeah, kind of character. Like she's put in her heavy years of fighting and warring by this point, which makes me wonder, like, you know, I know so many people want to be addressed. Okay, well, like her and Sabine went looking for Ezra, so where the is Ezra? Like, and maybe that's part of um, their encounter is, she's still out looking for somebody, kind of thing, and they're mutually going to a certain area of the galaxy to go looking. I don't know. Um, but no, I trust that with Filoni and what's his name? Man, I just totally spaced on our other showrunner, Favreau. Good grief.
Yeah.
Um, that
He's not somebody you would have
they
heard of, probably. Pretty
yeah, right.
obscure.
I don't. I know Filoni. He likes to keep his secrets and put cool things in, but I also think he's not always just putting things in. He's not always just shoehorning like this moment in for to get that fan reaction. I think it'll get it, but he wants it to definitely serve a purpose. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it'll be cool. I think seeing her on the live action screen um, is something that a lot of people will really freak out about. So, I mean, if
yeah,
anything, this show has um, been huge and been a really big deal. Uh,
it
and it's
didn't
one of the
even
few
get
things
released
that
into
we've.
the.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say, and it just got released in the UK streaming this week, which is
Yeah, that's
weird.
wild. They've got to be
Yeah,
so happy if they have, if they haven't like pirated it yet. But
yeah,
yeah, I think it's one of the few things that's like brought unity to the fandom. I'd say
mm-hmm.
that
For sure.
Rogue One is maybe the only other property that we've gotten post acquisition that would, you know, be something you could say the same thing about. I think that almost everybody has said that it is the best um, of, well, maybe not to this extreme, but a lot of people that I've talked to that aren't necessarily even Star Wars fans have said that they think that Rogue One is the best of the Disney movies. And
Yeah.
so, that and then The Mandalorian, I think, are pretty widely appreciated by Star
Mm-hmm.
Wars fans, non Star Wars fans alike. And then even within Star Wars fandom, the
Yeah,
different
they're good
factions
good
from
jumping
the,
off points for
yeah. So
getting
I,
into it. And
I think that they've kicked butt so far, and they're doing a good job of surprising us and bringing in the right aesthetic and telling fun stories. So yeah, I'm
I like
pumped.
fun stories.
You like fories?
I'm all about those 40s.
Good old fories, fun stories.
Uh, well, everybody, thank you for listening. Yeah, I'm sure the next episode of Clone Wars is up now, so you can be sure that everything we've just talked about will either double down on or say what fools we were. Who knows? We'll see.
In 2 weeks, we'll
come
either be saying, you know
come
what,
next
it was
episode.
worth it, or we'll be saying, come on, they doubled down. Why'd they do that? That seems like such a
Oh,
mistake. So,
yeah, those double downers.
we'll see.
Well, if you feel like conversing with us about your strong opinions, or be they in agreement with ours or against, you can find us at Force Cult on Twitter, Instagram, all the good stuff. I am at AK Star Wars Kid in all those places as well. You can find Jip on Twitter at Darth Legalis. Although I'm sure amidst all the time you have at home, you have been lurking elsewhere.
Oh, you bet I have. I have mostly been spending my time um, buying and selling toilet paper on eBay. Um, I've got 10,000 Costco sized packages of
Ah,
toilet
that's where it
paper
all went.
in a warehouse in the Gobi Desert. So you can't get to it. But if you are a listener somewhere in Asia, I can ship you a roll of toilet paper for 3 million yen. So come on.
Now it all comes to light.
I am not a war profiteer. I'm a disease profiteer. I'm the worst
There
of the
you go. It's
worst.
different. It's different. Yeah.
Send me right to jail.
Well, everybody, thank you for being here. May the force be with you. If you can, stay at home. Um, you know why. I don't feel like I got to preach that flatten the curve stuff, but let's just all do each other a favor.
I
And
want my son to know my parents as long as
yeah,
possible.
exactly.
So let's just think about that.
And if not, just think that a person that you sneeze on could sneeze on Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and that's what really counts.
Well, I think she might be invincible. So
All right. May the force be with you, everybody. Bye.